Well, hello there, Elizabeth.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
So it officially marks 1 year since you moved from the
Yes.
UK to the USA.
I know. It's been a long bloody year.
Oh yeah. How have you found it so far?
I'm I'm loving it. It's been a fast year and a slow year. Let's walk and talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when exactly did you move here?
I moved in April 2022 and we're finally in April 2023. So that makes it exactly 1 year.
Okay. So Elizabeth, why did you move to America?
Well, this is a funny one, but not really a funny one. I moved because my lovely, lovely husband is American. And so, yeah, he made me move. I'm joking, he didn't make me move. But I definitely moved of free will. And yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the immigration process and how
God,
long it
how
took.
many years do you have to listen to that? It was a very, very long and strenuous process, at the very least, to say. I mean, if we take it all the way back to the beginning of the process, it started with us getting married, and so we went to a town hall in the UK and had a civil marriage there. And once we did that, we kickstarted the process. The worst part about it was that we kickstarted the process just after COVID had hit. So it just meant that there were so many delays, like the government places weren't open, so they weren't processing applications. But what we initially had to do was just put in our application, confirming that we were married and that we wanted for me to move from the United Kingdom to the US. So that was the very beginning of the process. Once we had done that, it was basically a long waiting game. We had to literally wait for them to review all of our documents and to basically verify that we're in a real relationship. I guess people be scamming, so it means that they have to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, basically. So that's what made it take extremely long. Once they had verified, annoyingly, because I had changed my surname. Is this too much detail?
No, no.
Okay.
Keep going. Okay, but what were you saying?
So I was saying that because I had submitted all of the documentation with my marital name, it took us a year to even hear back from them. And then once we had heard back from them questioning and asking for that additional verification to make sure that I was the same person, we heard from them pretty quickly after that. So that was probably another 2 or 3 months after that process.
Okay.
And at that point, it basically got referred from being with the US immigration to the UK based immigration for the US, if you can make a field day out of that. So after we had got those documents sent over to the UK, it meant that they basically had to do their checks on their side as well and make sure that we were legally married and that we could proceed. And we weren't basically in a sham marriage, which is what they call it. I guess people fraud the government to try and get over to another country. And so they wanted to basically do their due diligence. So once it got referred over to the UK, we basically had to submit all of the documents again. And when I say all of the documents, I literally mean hundreds of pages of stuff. Proof, evidence, a picture timeline of our relationship, proof of travel that we had done together. Just lots and lots of stuff, basically, to prove that we were a real couple. So that can be quite a lot if you're not in a genuine relationship. Because how can you prove that you've done all of these things if you haven't if you haven't got the information, you haven't got the pictures, you haven't got the documentation, you can't prove it. It's a little bit hard, I guess, to fake lots of plane tickets and all of that. And I mean, we spent a hefty amount on planes doing long distance before we made the move. So we had to make sure that we had all of that stuff and we kept it logged from the very beginning, which we did a good job of. Let's keep going.
Okay.
So after it got referred to the UK, as I was saying, and they had reviewed all of our documents that we'd provided, they basically gave us kind of like an approval, basically. But at that point, you have to then go and have all of these medical exams, and they want to make sure that you're not brother and sister and trying to scam the system still. And then after all of that, they recommended me for an interview, and I went for the interview. They asked me a couple questions.
Was the interview difficult?
No.
Oh, yeah?
To put it short, if you're not in a fake relationship, it's really super easy to answer the questions. If you are in a fake relationship, then I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah,
But
because you
for
got
us,
to
it
make
was
up
easy.
stories and stuff.
Exactly, and it wasn't like I had to make anything up. It was like a free flow, like natural thing. You stand there in front of the immigration officer, they ask you a couple questions, and you keep it moving, and they tell you, like literally, I was so prepared for this interview. I came with a folder filled with evidence, like just to make sure that I could answer anything that they wanted me to answer. And I kid you not, the interview, for me anyway, was over in literally 2 minutes. And literally at the end of it, he was like, yes, you've been approved, so you're going to get a notification. And it was like, man, you're not going to make a bigger deal about this. Like, I've literally just spent 2 years almost of my, because that's how long it took from the beginning when we first submitted our things to the very end. It was almost a 2-year process because of how delayed COVID made everything. So it was like, aren't you going to be like, way, welcome to America? That's what I thought I was going to get. But he was literally just like, you've been approved. So we're going to send you this in the mail. You're going to get this. And yeah, you've got X amount of days from the day that you receive your notification to move to the US. And then that's when the journey began.
Okay. So the next question is, when you moved here, what was the process of finding a job? Because most people that move here, that's kind of like the first hurdle that they have to overcome is finding a source of income. Because America is not cheap. You know, everywhere you gotta pay rent, you gotta pay buy food. Everything's not cheap.
Yeah.
So what was that process like, finding a job?
I think I was blessed in the sense that obviously I had the support of my husband, and I was able to just lean on him and not have to worry so much about like trying to stress myself and find something. Because in the beginning, I was stressing and I was like, oh my God, I need to get a job like now. Like I need to make that transition like quick. Like why am I wasting time? Because obviously at that point, you're also thinking about the bigger picture of like, you want to have an income in the country that you live in. You also want to start to do things like build your financial credit history, and you can't do all of those things if you don't have a job. So at first I was stressing, but then had multiple chats with my husband. He was really reassuring and calming and just really helped me see that it's better that I apply for something that I genuinely want and get that than rush and just go for anything, because that's what I was doing. I mean, I was seeing some wild jobs out there on LinkedIn or on Indeed, and I really wanted to make sure that wherever I was going to go, it was going to be a smooth transition from having worked in the UK in what I would call a really, like working with a really flexible employer, to the US, which I'd seen all the movies, I'd seen all the things that people have to say about working in the US, like, oh, it's so rigid, and oh, it's like, you know, it's a tough life. And so I think I was a little bit worried about that. But once I kept on applying for things that I truly wanted to do, because I'd worked in project management in the UK and I wanted to find something similar or likewise in the US, it made it easier when I was being more specific and focused.
Okay. Would you say that you found a job that you're happy with for the meantime? And is it able to sustain living in America? Because you also live in the DMV area, which is not cheap. So you, would
Yeah.
you say that's
Yeah,
going
I
well?
mean, I think that the job that I have now is, I'm super grateful because it is a flexible, they are flexible employers, they're really super nice. I think I keep on saying and keep on like counting my blessings in that I couldn't have wished for a better organization to work for as my initial employer when I moved here. I think I could have done a lot worse for myself and I think I really did strike out. And in terms of living in the DMV, I think it's much better because there's two of us. I think if there was just one of me, it might make it a little bit difficult to maintain whatever lifestyle I want to maintain. But because there's two of us, it's two incomes, two salaries, two people in a household making things work together. So yeah, teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Okay. So what would you say is the biggest difference in the workplace? Like having, because I've met your boss, so I kind of know the vibe at your job.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the difference from having a black woman as your boss compared to working in an organization where it's less diverse, whereas at your job it's very diverse and it seems like it suits you better.
Okay, I'll take that. I think I don't know because when I worked in the UK, for example, it's not that it wasn't diverse. It's that let's say the decision makers at the place that I worked at weren't diverse. But in terms of the workforce and operationally, it was diverse. And I had a diverse manager then, and I have a diverse manager now. So I don't think that there's much difference in that. I think that was actually one of my worries, actually, that I wouldn't be able to be like my authentic self and be fully me, a black woman in America that's from the UK. But it's absolutely fine because I work for a diverse employer now. I have a diverse manager now, and I had one before. So it's not that much of a difference, to be honest, for me. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about how you got your car, because a lot of people, when
Yeah.
they get here, they realize that America is so big that
Yeah.
you can't really get around walking everywhere
Yeah.
or really catching a train because the public transport ain't just on the same level as other countries.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, luckily for me, when we lived in London, even when I was back in uni, I made sure to make an absolute priority to get my driver's license sorted. And I'm a first pass, like I passed on first try. So I've had my driver's license for a while. So it wasn't that hard because even though I did drive in London and I did also take public transport because the public transport was really bloody good. When I moved here, I already knew how to drive and I already had a license. So the transition to getting a US license was not that difficult. Instead of having to go through all of the driving school and like all of the different classes that you have to take, I only literally had to take one drugs and alcohol class. And then I just had to do the computer test. And then I had the actual driving test, and that was it. And I mean, I passed, so that was easy. But yeah, it's not easy getting around. If you don't have a car, it's pointless getting around. Like you can have somewhere that on the sat nav can say like it's a 3-minute drive, and it's gonna be like a 5-hour walk. I mean, that's a slight exaggeration, but you get the point. Like it's a really far walk because you're gonna take the Beltway, or in the UK we call it a motorway. So it's gonna take you a long time to make those 3 minutes. So it was an easy transition for me personally. The only thing was I had to keep telling myself, like when I'd be driving, I'd be telling myself that okay, do the opposite of what you would normally do. Don't do just do the opposite. Like when I would get to a roundabout in the UK, we go left on the roundabout. But when I'd get to one here, I'm like, okay, do the opposite. Right, what's the opposite? So it's like, you know, you're struggling with like the muscle mass memory of like just going that way. You're like, no, do the opposite. So yeah, that was the hardest part, I think, was getting used to driving on the opposite side of the road. But yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so how much do you miss your family and friends now that you're in a whole different country?
A lot. I don't even think I can put into words how much. It's actually disgustingly crazy how much. Because, yeah, it's just a lot. And I think it's not necessarily the place where you are that makes something home. It's more the people. So even though I miss London as a whole, it's definitely the people who made London what it was for me that make me miss it so much, because everybody's in London. All my friends, all my family, extended family, like everybody's there. So yeah, and I definitely think that my friends were my family as well, because I've had a lot of the friends that I have in London are friends that I've had in London for a very, very, very long time. So it's really hard to switch off being able to, for example, like we were saying earlier, in London things are a lot closer, so it's really easy to see people, to have access to people. I think my closest friend legit lives like a 5-minute walking distance away from me, and now my friend that lives here is like an hour plus drive. So it's definitely a transition, because it's not the same. I miss them all so much, and I'm very excited to be going back there this summer to be able to spend time with them and see them all as well. So yeah.
Okay, so how have you found it that you're the only one really around that has a British accent, and everybody else has the American accent? And I'm sure everybody tries to mimic your accent. So what do you feel about that?
God. I don't like. Do you know what? Sometimes I hear myself. It sounds really weird, but I feel like sometimes I can really hear myself, and I'm so aware of myself and how I sound, because everyone sounds so different. Everyone else sounds so different. I think at first it was kind of like, funny when people would joke about my accent and like copy things that I'm saying. It's not that way anymore. I think after a year of living here, it's definitely like, I know I'm gonna get it, so I kind of always expect it to happen. Like I always expect people to take the piss out of what I'm saying or how I'm saying it, or to think that I'm referring to something else because they call something like chips and crisps. Like they're always gonna think that I'm talking about something else when I say chips. But it's just something that I've definitely had to get used to over the year, for sure. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit annoying sometimes, if I'm not lying. But yeah.
Okay, that was an interesting answer. So, what do you think about the cost of living here compared to the UK?
Bloody hell, am I even qualified to answer that? I know that things like gas, electricity, etc. in the UK have risen ridiculously, and the cost of living crisis, or Cosy Lizzie as we call it in the UK, is really bad. I think, I don't know, like it's hard to compare it to here, because I live a very different life here to what I lived in the UK, if that makes sense. Obviously, in the UK, even though I was in a relationship and then I was married, I lived a very different life because I didn't live in a two-person house income household, if that makes sense. Like here, like I have the benefit of living with my spouse, and so that comes with the advantages of not feeling the impact of certain things as much as I used to feel them when I was like a one person on one salary and buying things on a one salary, whereas now I have, what's mine is his, what's his is mine. So I definitely have more money to expense in that sense. I think the price of eggs is something that is ridiculous.
The price of eggs.
Yes. Oh my God. So I shop at Aldi. It's Aldi, right? Yeah. I shop at Aldi, and the eggs, like the regular eggs, used to be like $2 something. But then they became $5. I mean, it didn't really impact me in the sense that I was already buying the organic eggs, and the organic eggs in Aldi is $5. So that price didn't change, which was fantastic. But it's seeing little things like that and then being like, what the hell? And then like when they put the signs on the fridges saying only buy 1 pack of eggs each, it's like, what the hell is going on? So I think it's definitely all around us. I think the UK and the US are both having a cost of living crisis because salaries ain't raising, but the price of food, housing, and everything else is. Like petrol, oh my God, I remember when my husband had to top up his petrol during the thick of the petrol price hikes, and we just have a regular car, just a regular sized American car, $100 to top up his fuel tank. I think that was ridiculous. But yeah, so all that to say that I think that the cost of living crisis is everywhere. It's all around us. It's in both countries, sadly. It doesn't seem like they want to do anything to fix it, but it's also not my place to compare it. So yeah.
Okay, what about the food here, like American cuisine?
I could have a field day on this one. I could have a field day.
Compared to the UK.
My number one question is, why does bread not mold? Why does fruit not mold? Why does vegetables not mold? Why does the bread have so much sugar in it? I just don't, it blows my mind. It's so crazy because I eat the exact same as I used to eat when I was in the UK, diet-wise, like diet range-wise, in terms of the types of vegetables I eat, the types of proteins I eat. It's all the same, right? But living here, I've had to make an even extra effort to lose weight because I'm eating the same, but I'm putting on crap loads more. And I think it's mainly because when you compare the two, you're thinking about like all of the preservatives and all of the chemicals and other toxic items that are allowed here that are currently banned in so many European countries. I think it's so ridiculous to see like how chemically things are. And I always keep saying we buy a loaf of bread and it will last weeks. And I'm thinking, where's the mold? Whereas in the UK, if I buy a loaf of bread, I'm expecting after 2 or 3 days for that loaf of bread to start molding. So it's definitely something that I'm always thinking about. I think my workaround currently is we found an Amish market nearby that we buy things at now because they seem to have a bit more natural resources than what we were getting from the regular supermarkets. And then I'm having to make more of a conscious effort with things like buying protein, like chicken. I'm having to look for the ones that say no antibiotics, no prebiotics. Like, I never used to have to think about that. And now it's like, I always have to be so conscious of the food that we're buying, the brands that we're eating. And it just blows my mind. Yeah, like I said, it blows my mind how many more things are allowed in the US that are currently banned in so many countries when it comes to food. Ridiculous. Like even Sunny D. I remember when I came here and I saw someone drinking that, I was thinking, I've not seen one of those since I was a kid. And I'm pretty sure at some point they had banned that in the UK because of the amount of sugar and chemicals that are in it. But here it's like just a standard drink. And I think that that's ridiculous. I don't know. It's two very different climates when it comes to what they allow because of the reasons why they allow it. I'm not going to go into that. That's clearly something that's people need to be mindful of. But yeah, definitely something that I think about 24/7 when it comes to food.
Okay, now in regards to foods and restaurants and stuff, give me some insight on tipping here when you go to a restaurant compared to not tipping at all in the UK, and how much of a change that is.
Sorry, I'm scared of dogs. Yeah, I think it's very strange how instead of having a minimum wage amount that is realistic that people can actually live off, they expect consumers to pay the gap, sorry, between what someone is earning and what they should be able to afford. Because I think that's not a thing. Like when I was in the UK, I mean, if I tipped great. I didn't really think about tipping. I never used to think about having to tip until I came here. And it's almost like if you don't tip, it's taboo or it's like frowned on. But why? Because why should I have to bridge the gap because an employer doesn't want to pay the right amounts to their staff? I think that's very odd to me, in my opinion. I've definitely adopted the values because, you know, they say when in Rome, live as the Romans do. So I do tip. I always tip, but I think that it's very strange that I am expected to tip instead of the onus being on the employer to give fairer wages. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the shopping differences in terms of clothing prices.
Ah.
Because I know UK has Primark and all these affordable places where you can shop, but there's not really any affordable places to shop in the US, really, unless you go to a thrift store. And there's only a select few of thrift stores that really sell decent clothes. But Primark is brand new, but it's also affordable and it also looks very nice.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit of your input on the price differences. Also, another example would be ASOS, where you can find things for cheap and it's really nice, but here in America it's damn near impossible.
Well, actually, I was going to say that ASOS is the only place that I shop. I find that the most reasonable. I mean, you know, give or take, you're going to find some things that are going to be super pricey, and then you're going to find other things that are going to be just reasonable and decent. So, yeah, for me, ASOS has been my best friend since I've moved, and Amazon, which is weird to buy clothing items or whatever from Amazon, but it's definitely between the two you can never fail, to be honest. And like you said, when you compare it to the UK and you're thinking about options, there's definitely a lot more options. It's definitely a lot easier, but then you could also say that I could be biased because obviously I've lived there for my entire life, so I know where to go. I don't have to even think or question it. Like if I need to go get some basic underwear or whatever, I know exactly where to go and it's really easy for me to find it. But when I'm here, it's just a little bit more research. Like I need to look into a bit more because obviously it's not my country. I mean, it is now, but it's not like I don't know exactly where to go for things. So I just tend to go for the things that are the places that are the most comforting to me. So like ASOS, I used ASOS when I was in the UK all the time. I used Amazon when I was in the UK all the time. So I haven't really strayed too far from those because I've definitely kept my cores the exact same as when I did live in London. So it hasn't changed in that sense, I would say.
Okay. Now,
But I would actually,
no, go
also
ahead.
add that I just find, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not used to it, but I definitely think things are they feel so expensive here. They do feel expensive. Like it feels expensive to just get like a basic pair, like bunch of underwear. Like it feels expensive. I don't know. Maybe because I'm doing the comparisons and thinking about the easiest place to get items in London being Primark, Primani, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it just feels so expensive here. Like I haven't found my Primark. So take with that what you will.
Now, what about TV?
TV?
Yeah, like TV channels,
Oh, okay.
shows,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, I never thought I would be one to say I miss BBC, I miss
BBC.
Channel 4, 4OD, I miss ITV. Like, I'm having to catch up on like all the shows that I would watch in some bootleg way. So like, for example, Love Island, which is like the biggest thing that I would watch on TV in the UK. I have to watch that now on Hulu, which I'm really glad they have moved it to Hulu because it means I have an avenue to watch it. But before then, I literally would have to go back to London and catch up that way because, yeah. But I mean, there's some great TV here. But I think nowadays anyway, no matter where you live, a lot of people use a lot of subscription services regardless. So it doesn't really matter too tough. Like, we have all the usual stuff like Netflix, HBO, just all the usual subscription services that people would use anywhere. So it's not specific to here.
Okay. Okay, so in England, you know, healthcare is free for everyone. But here, you know, your healthcare is basically based on the job you have and the type of benefits that comes with that job. Basically correlates with the type of insurance that you have. So how does it feel coming from the UK where you knew no matter what, you could get time off for your health care and you could get the health care all paid for compared to now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, again, I'm probably blessed because luckily for me, I was able to join my husband's insurance. So that made it very easy. I didn't have to think too tough, I guess, about it. But I think that it's just a thought. Like, it's an extra thing that you have to think about that you wouldn't have to think about, if that makes sense. Like, in the UK, if I needed to go to the emergency room, I would just get up and go. Like, I'm not thinking, oh, I've got to pay co-pay or whatever. Like, I've got to contribute to go to the doctors. I think the thing that's like at the forefront of my mind, just because I'm getting a bit older, obviously I'm married, you know, you think about family and stuff. The one thing that is on my mind is how expensive it is to have a baby here in comparison to knowing that if I was in London and I wanted to have a baby with the NHS, that it wouldn't cost me anything. But I guess here, regardless of who your employer is, regardless of what insurance policy you're on, you're always going to have to pay something. You're going to be out of pocket in some way, shape or form. Like, if I wanted to call the ambulance in the UK, I wouldn't even think twice about it because it sounds bad, but I'm not paying for it, right? So it's not an extra thing that you have to think about. Whereas here, I'm more conscious that, like, if you need to do something like that, you have to pay for it. So,
yeah, a lot of people are very resistant to even get on an ambulance because they know how much it is. So when the ambulance shows up, normally they don't even get on it.
Exactly. Whereas, like I was saying,
rather drive themselves to the hospital.
Yeah. It's just an extra thing that you have to think about that you wouldn't otherwise have to. So I think that's what it is, more than it being an inconvenience or a problem. I'm sure with time I'm going to get used to it because I don't have a choice. Like, that's the system that's in place here. So there's no other option. There's no way to go and seek free healthcare. I guess unless maybe you're on like social benefits, perhaps you can get free healthcare that way. But otherwise, you are going to have to make a budget for that or consideration for that. And if, God forbid, you lose your job, that is something you majorly have to think about. But I never had to think about that in the UK. I mean, I guess things might be changing in the UK where they're saying that there's some privatisation of the NHS. But at this point, I would not have had to think about it. And now I am thinking about it because I ain't just gonna pop a baby out and have like 10 grand to go pay. I ain't gonna do that. Whereas if I was in
10 grand,
London,
you think it's 10 grand? It was way more than that.
oh, exactly. So I'm not gonna do that. Whereas if I was in London, maybe I would be a bit more like, yeah, let's get them kids popping, you know. But yeah, it's just an extra thing you have to think about, to be honest.
Okay. Okay, so what would you say is the benefits and maybe the downsides of the police here? Because, here, obviously, they have guns and stuff, but in the UK, the officers don't have any weapons. Well, they have weapons, just not guns, you know. And in America, also, there's a lot of people have guns
Can you hear me?
where, yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
I don't think I can answer that question here.
Yes, you can.
Sitting in front of the White House with a police officer standing right
Yes, you
next
can.
to you.
I'm waiting for an answer.
Oh, okay. You don't care. Okay, well, just for some context, there's a police officer right there in my line of view. We're sitting in front of the White House where it's heavily security-wise. Okay, the benefits. I mean, if you want people to be scared of the police, they're doing a great job. That's what I can see you say about the police. I think one thing that I always compare it to is that if I was in the UK and I was driving and I got pulled over by a police for whatever reason, maybe if I was accidentally speeding or like if like my tail lights are out or whatever, I would not be scared. I would not be worried. I think regardless of how mean that person was gonna be, I wouldn't have a concern. I wouldn't have that extra layer of concern. Whereas here, I think I would feel very nervous. Not because I'm intentionally doing anything wrong or intentionally like not following the law or whatever, because I would never do that. I would never want to break any laws. It's just because there is a bit of a fear that comes with their presence, I would say. And I think if we're thinking about the things that are currently going on in the world, that would add an extra layer of fear for me, being in America and having that. I don't know, maybe for some people they see that if the police are heavily equipped with guns, they feel safer. I don't know that that's the case for me. And I get that it's completely personal. It's based on how certain communities may feel their relationship is with police. But I think for me, I've never done anything to be on the wrong side of the law, and God willing, I never will do anything to be on the wrong side of the law. But it's just something that I feel uncomfortable about. Like, I just feel a bit uncomfortable, a bit worried, like a bit nervous, that extra layer of nervousness. Whereas, like in the UK, if I wanted to, I remember when I was in uni, we had this assignment where we had to go up to a police officer or go up to like a figure, like an authoritative figure, and ask them certain questions that they'd set us at uni. And I didn't have any problems with walking up to the police and asking them questions. I didn't. But here, I think I would just think about it a little bit more. And that's, I guess, the disadvantage, if you want to call it a disadvantage, of having police that's heavily equipped. I don't know, but I'm sure there's also some people that would feel absolutely fine in walking up to them, but that's because this is their country and they're used to it. So maybe with some years under my belt and not just 1 year, I would feel more comfortable with it.
Okay, so in the places that you visited in the U.S. so far, what would you say is your favorite of all the states that you've visited? And mind you,
Oh,
right now you're sitting in front of the White House in Washington, D.C.
yeah,
So what would you
yeah.
say is your favorite so far?
Oh, I think there's different places for different reasons, so I'll go into that. I think when I went to Chicago, absolutely loved their deep pan dishes, pizzas. That was fantastic. I had a great time. I enjoyed the food. It was fantastic. I loved that for that reason. I think I just always have such a love in my heart for DC. I think we've spent a lot of nights in DC. Like, I've spent a lot of time like getting to know DC, and I really thoroughly enjoy it. We're obviously based in Maryland, and I really enjoy living in Maryland. I just feel safe. I guess it depends where you live. Like where we live in Montgomery County, I do feel really safe and I do really enjoy it. I think now that we live in a city, there's a lot more things that we can go out and do as opposed to living in the suburbs. Where else would I say? Oh, I really enjoyed Pennsylvania just because like certain parts of it, we went to Pittsburgh and I felt like it was kind of similar to London, so I really enjoyed that. But if I had to pick one as my favorite top number one, I'll probably pick where we live, which is Maryland, because it's so close to DC. It's so close to other places in the East Coast. There's so many things you can do. I feel safe, like it feels diverse. Yeah, I would have to pick the place that we live. But if I want a bit of sunshine, oh, and I really like that Maryland seems to have the 4 seasons. I really enjoy that. So I would probably say that's another win for me.
Allow customers to exit. When boarding, please move to the center of the car. Step back, doors closing.
Okay, Elizabeth. So, last question.
Oh, really?
Last question.
Okay.
Do you like the move that you made, and do you plan on living here for a long time?
I'm very glad that I made the move. I think it was the right time for my relationship. It was what we needed to do. I mean, we had done long distance at that point for what felt like forever. So, yeah, I don't regret the move. I'm so glad I did it. I think forever seems so permanent and probably, I mean, who knows what the future holds? You can never say never. I'm definitely open to living in other countries now that I've done it once. I could possibly do it again as long as, the circumstances are right and it makes us happier. That's what the priority is going to be always. So I'm definitely always open to moving elsewhere. I don't think America is permanent forever, but I look forward to what the future has to bring and what it holds and where I might end up.
Okay. Well, it was nice talking to you. Thanks for interviewing with me.
Thank you.
All right, till next time.
Thanks.